We are back again with our Emissary Author Series today. Again, Sam Feeney's Career Factors with, you guessed it, Sam Feeney. Sam Feeney wrote this fantastic book called Sam Feeney's Career Factors, Unlock Fulfilling Work Without Leaving Your Job. And today we're going to talk about engaging teachers from day one. And we're going to do a little bit of comparison and contrast between what is typically done and what these new opportunities are as Sam unfolds that for us. Sam, welcome back.
Thanks, Jason. Excited to be here as always. And it's kind of fun to think about the subtitle of the book, Without Leaving Your Job. We're going to start at the very beginning of when you first get your job, which is a nice place to start for a lot of people. Let's start liking it from the beginning.
Well, absolutely. And I remember when we were talking about naming the book, and the Career Factors obviously was pretty key to that, but this idea of without leaving your job, I think it really is that basic for all of us, that we have these basic needs, and whether we come right out and say it or whether we cover it up with something else, it is really, hey, do I need to look for a new position? Am I confident and comfortable in this position? Am I safe in this position? And the topic today for teachers, engaging teachers from day one, is really not only a teacher issue, but it's an administration issue, something that you've dealt with for many years. So unpack this for us. Where are we at with engaging teachers from day one?
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that I think we don't give enough credit to. And I was really struck by this a couple of years ago. A friend of mine told me that he took a job. He's a computer programmer, and he said, I took this job and they did such a good job of the orientation that I ended up staying 3 times longer than I had originally planned to. Like, okay, if our efforts can be rewarded at this point in someone's career or someone's experience with a particular school district, why wouldn't we put some more effort into this? So you talked about a compare and contrast. One district I worked with recently, I got to review their initial orientation, and I asked the assistant superintendent, is this basically just a whole day of how not to get fired? And like, it was all just, details and safety stuff and, like things you have to do. These are very important things to do. I'm not saying safety is not important, but it was, I could picture some of the people leaving that day and thinking, what have I got myself into? Like feeling deflated instead of built up and fired up about their year. So we've got to do something about this.
Well, it seems to me that your career factors concept is a sort of a human nature issue and not really a functional issue. And I think sometimes those introductory seminars and, welcome to the company, welcome to the school, those focus sometimes on maybe the functional issues and not the human issue. So how do you recommend and pair this idea of career factors with that initial push for engagement?
In my research, I found that almost every single teacher is a human. And so I'm trying to approach that time. We talk, about Maslow's hierarchy and, what needs are we meeting, that whole thing. And yes, there's some really important ones, but the way that I've been able to use career factors with employees and teachers is not only to be able to really drill down to, what are you making sure your needs are being met, but how do we use this to connect you with other people around you, finding commonalities. Every year when I do a new teacher orientation, I say, welcome to the class of, 2025. That will be this fall's orientation. Like, you're coming in together for the first time. This is, it's like a graduating class. You're going to move through your careers together, some of you for a long time. And it humanizing, as you've noted, humanizing the experience allows us to really things that we look for. And what are those things as they show up in our career factors? Well, if we can address those and start to build the common language and start to address those now, what's really important is it perpetuates, especially if you've worked with career factors in your school already, it perpetuates a common language. They're already into the thing that you talked about last year before they got there, right? So that's something of this I think is really people need to be aware of is if you have worked on employee engagement, teacher engagement in the past, that these new people are coming in cold. You need to catch them up on cultural things that matter, like a common language around teacher engagement.
So I want to reconnect us to the prior two seminars that we've done. The first one was what isn't working in teacher engagement and retention. And that idea of retention is not just exclusive to teachers and administrators and schools, but it is sort of universal, I think, across all organizations. And it recalls to my mind that there was a study done on one of the indicators of longevity in a career was your interpersonal relationships, how well you were known and how well you knew others. Talk us through that concept, because I think it really pairs with, your friend who stayed 3 times longer in an organization than he planned on because of that initial connection.
Yeah, and that even harkens back to our part 2 in this series, which talks about the administrator and teacher dynamic, and is that one of heavy-handed oversight, disconnected, seemingly disinterested oversight, or partnership in collaboration. That's all of those things you can capture in a 2-day new teacher, new faculty workshop around that's built around making sure that your individual new hires are being their needs are being addressed, but also the connections. One of the things that that when you're talking about that bringing in people, and I remember myself as a new teacher coming in feeling very much on the outside. I had felt a connection to 1 or 2 teachers who were also new, but otherwise everyone else, it felt like they'd always been there. It felt like they'd been there forever, and then I had to kind of earn or work my way into that. But if it's done well, a new teacher orientation also not just connects horizontally, but it connects vertically with someone else, whether that's a mentor, an administrator, something like that, where they're feeling part of a whole in a couple of different ways, and that can really help with retention, even frankly from the orientation to the first day of school, right? Like the week and a half or whatever the gap might be in there. You've got to be able to connect those dots from the seat of the person who's coming in, and Career Factors gives you a toolbox to do that.
Okay, so a teacher begins a new school year. There's administration that's in place. Maybe some positions have been jostled, but that school has a bit of momentum. That culture has momentum to it. And what I'm hearing, and I don't mean to be remedial about this, but I think it's so important. What I'm hearing is the culture has certain cues. The culture has certain words, terminology, vocabulary, and the meaning behind that. And it seems to me that if administration doesn't invite someone into that space and say, hey, I want to make you feel safe and comfortable here. Here's how we talk about your job. Here's how we talk about these career factors versus what's the alternative? I think the alternative is that it just sort of happens by osmosis, and you're not advocating for control, because control would be, hey, say this, don't say that. Right. Whereas you're advocating for an inclusive environment where everybody feels safe and confident because we now understand the words and what we mean by them. Talk to me about that moment, because I love how you bring up that first week. Talk to me about that moment, which I think is so pivotal for setting a long-term, setting up an individual up for long-term success.
Mm-hmm. It was interesting. I'm reminded of for in teaching in general, there's something called the hidden curriculum. Like, what are we teaching kids that we aren't saying that we're teaching them? It's like how to meet deadlines and how to ask for help if you need it. In the same way, an employer for an employee, a district for a teacher has a hidden curriculum. These are the things you need to know, but they aren't necessarily overtly, they're not in the handbook. We're not going to necessarily tell you these things. This is the kind of the way we operate. You can't exhaustively go through all of those things early on, but you can connect a new teacher to someone who is their point person. And, we talk about the career factors being a toolbox to make that connection. It's not the only one. If you have yours already, if you know of one that's working, awesome, probably use it more. But in our case with career factors, what we've been able to see is that common language that I talked about that applies to everybody, from the superintendent all the way down to the bus driver. It's connecting us where we often minimize the most, is in our humanness. It is in our, what I call our work why, the thing that we're really here for. And so I love the ability to say, for somebody who is coming in, say, hey, you don't know everything yet, but this is, Sue is your woman to go talk to if you have those questions, and then being able to kind of backfill that and train. Let's say Sue is the department chair of the world languages department, and she's a mentor. If she has just a few of these tools, like what is this person's number one career factor? What are some of the exercises, some of the things I can do to engage them, to make it about them, but about them in a work context, then I feel more comfortable, other than like, where'd you go on vacation? And what's your favorite meal? And like all this like silly icebreaker stuff that we never really get past, unfortunately, until we get into the trenches with people. This allows people to say, hey, let's get in the trenches now about stuff that actually matters, so that when something comes up in October or March, that connection's already real and not just nominal.
That idea of why a person does what they do, I can think of the teacher, I think it was my first grade teacher. She really stands out to me, and she has a building named after her now at my old school. She was influential for many, many years, and I could hypothesize why she taught and devoted her life to that, but I don't know. And I'm curious, when you walk into a school, because you've put on these seminars and you advocate for this in your book, Career Factors, but when you walk into a school, how many people are actually really in touch with their underlying reasoning for why that job is, why they like their job and why they want to continue in it?
Yeah, very few. And I think many of them will have the answer that they're supposed to give, but very few will have the real answer. And that's one of the things I've actually built this into for programs for schools, into the hiring process as well, where from the beginning we're talking about, yes, you want to stay warm, dry, and fed. We've got, you've got this certain minimum threshold for what you need in terms of money. But at the end of the day, what this allows schools to do, whether it's somebody in HR or administration, to be able to say, yes, there is that common foundation for most of us on, I need to get paid X number of dollars. Great. We'd like to operate a little bit higher, right? A little bit higher plane. Let's, from the beginning, from your first day, from our new teacher orientation, let's pull you up a little bit and keep you hanging there, so that we can talk about the stuff that really matters. Because as we talked about in one of our previous sessions, the compensation only limits my dissatisfaction. It doesn't create satisfaction. So eventually that's an arms race that I think districts will be relieved to know that they don't have to continue to participate in, because some of them just won't be able to, right? They're like,
right,
we don't have a ton of money. So, what do we do if we don't have that option? We'll keep people at that higher level of their career factor, their motivation for work, and connect them to people who know what that is and can. I would say that one of the biggest roles of a coach is to remind people of why they're doing what they're doing. And they don't need more information as much as they need to remember the information that they have. The career factors assessment, they get to see their top 2 or 3 career motivators and really dig into what that means, what that looks like for them. Then you just need a mentor who throughout the year can connect with them and say, hey, you said, your number one is growth. Have you seen that in growth opportunities throughout the year? Have a conversation about the thing that matters to that new teacher. It's going to lock them in like crazy for, oh my gosh, not only am I remembering and actively participating in my own career motivation, I've got people who are reminding me of what's important to me. Like, that's a gift. And not nearly enough districts do this. And what they do in effect, unfortunately, is then they commoditize the job and they commoditize the person, because it becomes just goes back to compensation and competence, which we know doesn't work.
Yeah. The idea of compensation, being the number one issue, has been disproven so many times in all sorts of studies that, money is not people's primary motivating factor. They will happily do with less money if there are other things in place, because, we are complicated individuals and we are not as simple as collecting paychecks. And we can kind of, and yeah, I think you said compliments there, and we can see through compliments to know that's a disingenuous compliment, or you're just telling me that because you have to. And so I moving into the space of opportunity. Now teachers, I think, are no different than a lot of other folks, because what we're talking about is they're human, and humans want, I think, to be engaged in, particularly a teacher. They want to be engaged in something that is meaningful, creating value, right? I think we all want to do that. Now, beyond the classroom, where a teacher exerts a certain influence, and I think these career factors, obviously are effective in enlightening that individual to why they are there, and enlightening administration as well. There are other opportunities outside of the classroom, and I think I'm answering my own question here, but I want you to dig into it because you're the expert here. If an administrator knows what the whys are, what these influential factors are for each individual, wouldn't they be able to place that individual into, or provide opportunities to that individual that are not only beneficial for the school, but really light a fire under that specific person, whereas that same opportunity would be ineffective for somebody else?
Yeah, and that speaks to the tendency we have in education. I'm sure it happens in other industries as well, but the tendency in education that we have to sort of offer one and done professional growth opportunities or professional development, continuing education. The one and done part only will ever scratch the surface, and or really has minimal application in future months and years. And so one of the parts that I think is so important, if you can establish a mentorship program or some sort of a coaching program, then you can have opportunities to help the individual dig deeper into what their career looks like. I talk about a good friend of mine who I was a counselor with for a long time. She and I both, I would say, our number one would be impact. However, the way that our impact looked and how we measured it individually was so different that we often were at odds, because we were going about things differently because we were chasing different versions of impact. And so what you have in a mentorship relationship is an ability to help the new teacher really define for him or herself what it is that growth looks like, or that environment looks like, or that lifestyle looks like. And then that person can say, hey, I saw this and I thought of you. And it's really that self-definition of then applied holistically to their career. That takes some unpacking. And that's why we talked last time with Christina about the value of coaching in an administrative role. And it could be very much more informally in a mentorship role as you build a mentorship program. But the ability to help them keep digging deeper to figure out, okay, what does this look like? We have a fun activity called the other side of the coin, where we just say, what doesn't it look like? Like, let's just start there. If you don't know what it looks like, right? But you need, like, teacher needs a mentor or an administrator to give them the space and the prompting to reflect on those things, so that then there's an alignment. Then there's a okay, now we know that this makes sense for you and not for this person because we're really speaking the same language.
One of the sayings that I sort of live by is, if you want better answers, ask better questions. And I say that because so many of us are bad at asking questions of ourselves and certainly of others. Now, one of the questions that is answered a lot of times through college or early on in careers is personality type. And we do all sorts of personality surveys. And walk us through why the career factors is different and supplemental to personality surveys.
Personality for me fits into the kind of the how category, how I go about doing something, whereas career factors fits under the why category. And so if you think about the golden circle from Simon Sinek's How Great Leaders Inspire Action, or the book Start with Why, it's why is at the center, then how, that how's a differentiation, and then what is a differentiation outside of that. So while I appreciate personality assessments and some of the things that are out there, they can be insights, but the why at the end of the day is a pretty big deal. And one thing I was very careful with career factors is to not overutilize the results. There are some amazing assessments out there that I think are very, very effective. And for me, there's a little bit of a stretch on, okay, well, this is how it applies to your relationships. This is how it applies to your workplace. This is how it applies to whatever, your hobbies. And so I was very intentional about making career factors about career and not even thinking about applying it elsewhere. Because my thought is that if you're happy at work and you're not job hopping every year, and as an administrator, you're not refilling the revolving door, there's enough. A career has enough of an effect on our lives that everything else will just be fine. It'll work itself out because the dominant portion of our waking hours is at that career. And so if we know why we're there, how we happen to express it through our personality, and what we do through our actual, let's say, course load, duty schedule, whatever it might be, is great as long as we've checked those boxes along the way.
Yeah. One of the visuals that comes to my mind is that perhaps this is a lot like painting and a lot less like puzzles. Puzzles have particular boundaries. A piece fits exactly here and does not fit anywhere else. Whereas painting, one color blends into the next. And if it didn't, it might look a little weird. And so the perhaps the soft nature of these are tendencies. These are maybe things for today. Have you seen somebody's career factors change throughout their career?
Yeah, mine. I recommend taking it every 3 months just to kind of take the temperature on where things are right now. That's a proactive approach, so that you can avoid being stale. So one thing I recommend for districts is, in particular to this topic of the new employee, is you take it as part of the hiring process if you're able to, just because it's a great conversation piece about really why do you want this job. You do it through orientation if you haven't done it there, and then you have certain points in the year. I recommend 4 times throughout the year to take the temperature on a new person, because they're most likely, if you're going to lose somebody, it's going to be early in their career, and you won't know. And to your point about asking better questions, we have a whole exit interview built around this as well, just because you need to get that feedback, or you're the only one who doesn't know it, right? So as we think through the application of it, I also then say beginning and end of every year if you're a veteran, because you'll have the rose-colored glasses a little bit at the beginning of the year of what you're about, and then you'll have the trial by fire. Okay, I'm done. It's May or June. What am I taking from this that I can reflect on over the summer? So I recommend taking it a lot of times, and we're actually building an HRIS so that schools can start to track longitudinally. Are there seasons when teachers' career factors change, or we have a sub-satisfaction with their career factor, right? Like, if your number one is lifestyle, how's that going right now? So we can start to even predict when people might leave. But that all starts from day one if you are able to. And then that's something that you can just keep producing. And hopefully, frankly, your orientation gets smaller and smaller over the years.
Now, we've spent a lot of time talking about administrators and teachers and this in schools, and primarily because you've been in schools for a number of years. And that's what inspired you. I think not only your expertise, but your experience in schools inspired you to dig into this, research it, produce Sam Feeney's Career Factors, and also do consulting with schools. But this framework is portable to other industries. And the reason this is interesting, not only I think it's interesting for the audience, but I just got back from teaching a couple hours of an entrepreneurship class, and I do it 4 days a year. They invite me as a guest speaker, among other guest speakers. Now, if I think of my why, if I went through the career factors, I 100% know I do not want to teach high school entrepreneurship as a career, but I really do enjoy going in for some specific, 1 or 2 days here and there. I get a real jazz out of it. And I find myself right now going, why does that matter to me? And I wonder if our viewers and listeners also are in the same boat. I do these things, but I don't know why. And I wonder what could be what door could be magically opened for me if I really sat with that, like you're talking about, in some sort of maybe it's at a critical moment, like something has changed, or I want to embark on a new endeavor, or maybe it, like you're talking about, is just taking the temperature. Has something changed and I am unaware of it? As we've so much talked about these ideas of, there's the why we say we do things and the real reason we do things, or the curriculum and the hidden curriculum. There's all these things under the surface, which if we ask the right questions, we can get the answer for. They're not secret necessarily. We're just not asking the question. So walk our viewers and listeners through how this is portable to other industries and where they can get involved. How do they begin this process?
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm going to be doing a training for a client in a couple of weeks called The First Domino. It's for leaders, and it's from all industries. And it's, before you can expect or hope for engagement from your employees, you need to have it for yourself, because you're the one who's out front. And so I found this to be applicable in a lot of different industries when people have, usually from the individual side, they've read the book, they've taken the assessment, and, in tech, in the nonprofit sector, and, just all points in between, financial, because it does speak to for some reason, the way that we're wired, career matters. And people, in particular, if they've gone through what's happened in the last 10 years and moved jobs and, and kept moving up a ladder that used to be linear with their current, with one employer, and now is all over the place with remote work and everything else, they're finding that there still is that desire for work to do more for them than they are asking for it on the surface, and they don't know what it is. And that mystifying question of, like, I have this, why am I not happy, is what Career Factors dives in and talks about. And that is universally applied regardless of industry, because it does speak to our human drives and what the research shows, that industry independent of what makes people happy at work. And so what we've created is with an assessment and a coaching program, whether you're an individual or a district or a corporation, we've created tools that can help people do this. And the key is for people who are in industry is, that the big fear that I try to address out of the gate is, I'm not going to come in and do a keynote and then everyone's going to leave. Because we're like, forget it, I'm out of here. The real power is, you talked about doors opening. The real power is the door opens and you haven't left your seat. And you're still, like, it's not because you're different. What if you could just, and I assert this from the go, just by knowing your career factors, you will enjoy your job more. or you'll know why you don't and can do something about that. So it's a pain in the rear to change jobs. I don't recommend the job hopping that's happening a lot, that's kind of becoming commonplace, without a compass, which is here's what I'm looking for beyond just how much I get paid.
I really like that idea of the compass. It because it gives us direction, and I think it's human nature to answer complicated questions in with the most basic surface level answers. So why am I dissatisfied in my job? And we go, it's my boss, I gotta leave. When in fact it could be any number of criteria, but we don't, like we talk about, don't have a vocabulary to even name it. And if we can't name it, idea of manufacturing, they have this saying, if you can't measure it, you can't change it. But if you measure it, you manage it, right? So if you measure it and manage it, great. In this case, if you can name it, then you could deal with it. But until it has a name, then it's nebulous. And when it's nebulous, we go, escape. Especially if somebody next door is like, hey, we can get you more money. And so I think this is so important because there is a lot of opportunity to job hop. There are then these mandates, requirements for organizations to increase retention and decrease people leaving. And then this point of influence with teachers and administrators, we're influencing the entire generation of people who will then go on to be satisfied or dissatisfied in their own careers. Do you see, and as we're winding down our time here, do you see the payoff then if an administrator sets the framework right out of the gate, teachers are engaged with that, they begin to understand their whys? Do you see that there's a payoff to the students and the teachers sort of passing on that same idea and methodology and that vocabulary to students?
I would say there is, even if they don't pass it along, even if it remains a hidden curriculum. One of it, outside of our parents, our teachers are the people who have careers who we interface the most with for the first 16, 17 years of our lives.
Yeah.
And how they model their view of work, their career satisfaction will stick with us for a really long time. And so I've created a curriculum for students, the career factors for students. And very excited about that part because I'd like to set kids off on the right trajectory from the beginning. But even if they don't get that, even if it always just stays at the teacher level and kids are coming to school and seeing that there are people around them who are, it's not Pollyanna, it's not, there are tough days, but that's the reason why we talk about this. It's for the tough days. It's so you can muscle through and say, well, wait a second, this is hard, but I know why I'm doing it, so I can keep moving forward. To have the example of those people for them, I think is a really big gift to kids, even if the kids don't fully understand why they have engaged teachers. And the research also shows, even just for student performance, that engaged teachers leads to engaged students who are learning and achieving at a higher level. So I think it's a win no matter how you slice it.
Yeah, sounds that way to me as well. Now let's wind this down into, how do people begin this path for getting involved with Sam Feeney's Career Factors?
Yeah, man, I definitely recommend before you bring this to your district, maybe check the book out for yourself, just to make sure that it passes muster. You're also going to get a glimpse into the coaching program because a number of the chapters include exercises from the coaching program. And then be able, if you want to reach out and just talk through a little bit, okay, hey, here's what we're currently doing. What are some suggestions? I love being able to come in to a district who is trying to do the best they can for their teachers and their kids. That is a great opportunity to be able to say, okay, if we don't have to scrap everything we're doing, how do we layer in career factors or just in general employee engagement and retention efforts to the thing, so it doesn't feel like another initiative, which teachers have had plenty of. It feels like, there's maybe some context or some more effectiveness to what we're currently doing. so that we get a greater return on our investment into our teachers.
Absolutely. Well, I so much appreciate you being here with us today. This is the third and final installment of our author series with Sam Feeney and Sam Feeney's Career Factors, a new book. There's a new edition. There's a QR code right above my head if you're watching this video. Scan that. You'll be able to go get Sam's new book. It's available on Amazon. It's available also at thecareerfactors.com. You've got a direct link again in that QR code. I'm Jason Todd with Emissary Publishing. We're so proud to bring Sam Feeney's Career Factors to you. Sam, thanks for joining us today.
Great being here, Jason. Always fun to talk about this and to hopefully inspire people to dig back into their careers, especially if they've just decided to kind of give up on a career really bringing some satisfaction.
Yeah, I love how you brought out this idea that we spend the best hours of the day, the best days of the year working. We might as well know why we are satisfied or dissatisfied. So if anybody has a question like that, head to thecareerfactors.com. Sam, we will talk soon. And to our viewers and listeners, thanks for joining us on another Emissary Author Series, Sam Feeney's Career Factors.